Welcome to the Uncanny Magazine Podcast, episode 65B. I am Michael Damian Thomas, the editor-in-chief and publisher of Uncanny Magazine. Well, Space Unicorns, I am a little on the exhausted side today, but I'm going to push through this. Those of you all know we've been running the Uncanny Magazine Year 12 Kickstarter, and more on that on a second, as Hugo the cat jumps on the desk to shake everything. Hi, Hugo. Otherwise, Space Unicorns, the world is pretty scary. It is a scary place at the moment. It does seem like bad news happens every day, and it is hard. But the one thing about all of it is, and this is the thing about Kickstarter season, is that it is wonderful watching the Space Unicorn community come together and just seeing like, yes, we can do it. We can do things together collectively as wonderful, amazing, magical Space Unicorns. So thank you, everyone. Because as of this moment, actually happened just a couple hours ago, the Uncanny Magazine Year 12 Fly Forever Space Unicorns Kickstarter funded. So yes, we will be having a 12th year Space Unicorns, which is exciting. It will be work, but it is exciting that it has now happened. And at this stage, so thank you to everyone who has already backed the Kickstarter. As you listen to this podcast, if you're listening to it when it goes out, the Kickstarter actually ends on Wednesday, August 6th at 9 p.m. Central. So there is still time to be a part of it if you're listening. But if you're listening later and you're like, oh, I didn't even know there was an Uncanny Magazine Kickstarter because the world is terrible and I've been hiding. Well, there is good news for you, Space Unicorns, because there will be late pledges open on the Kickstarter. But yes, so we are fully funded for year 12 as far as the basics go. And right now, we are in the process of going after those stretch goals. So, at this moment, we are working towards the original cover art from Galen Dara. But after that is an original cover art from Paul Lewin, then original cover art from Katie Shuttleworth. Then after that, and this is an important one, and I super, super hope we make this one, Space Unicorns, a 20% increase to staff payments, which is important to me because everybody here works so hard. I could not do this without the best staff in the the best staff in the universe. They are absolutely amazing. And yeah, obviously they are a major part of all of this. And it is important that people get paid for their work, Space Unicorns. And then hopefully then after that, we will continue to have flash fiction and a novella. But these are all the stretch goals. As of this moment, I can't, I am in the past and I cannot read what is going on. Maybe hopefully there is good progress. If not, as I said, late pledges will be open. So let's keep this rolling. And once again, thank you to everybody out there who has backed the Kickstarter, who has boosted, who offered, especially all the authors who offered generously all these amazing backer rewards. Just once again, it is just so wonderful to be part of the Space Unicorn Ranger Corps. It's just, thank you all. It is the best community in the universe. Let us make another year of Uncanny and shine on, Space Unicorns. Yay! And now for the news. So some fabulous news, Space Unicorns. The 2024 Shirley Jackson Award winners have been announced, and Three Faces of a Beheading by Arkady Martine won the Best Short Fiction Shirley Jackson Award. Congratulations to Arkady and to all the phenomenal finalists and winners. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Get ready for LACon 5, the 84th World Science Fiction Convention. Join fans, writers, and creators from around the galaxy for 5 days of panels, cosplay, and unforgettable fandom at the Anaheim Convention Center, August 27th to 31st, 2026. See you in the future.
And welcome back, Space Unicorns. In this episode of the Uncanny Magazine podcast, we're featuring the short story The Garden by Emma Törzs, as read by Erika Ensign. Wishbone by Prosper Ìféányí, as read by Matt Peters, and I will be interviewing Emma Törzs. So The Garden, this is Emma Törzs's 5th time in Uncanny Magazine, and Emma always just writes the most beautiful, gorgeous, slightly weird, slightly wonderful stories. Some of you might remember her first story, Like a River Loves the Sky, won the World Fantasy Award. First story for Uncanny Magazine, that is. Like a River Loves the Sky won the World Fantasy Award. And The Garden is no different from the others. This is just one of those beautiful, lyrical, character pieces with lots of weird world building underneath, and just so many interesting questions, and that some are answered, some are left lingering. It's just a wonderful story. So I'm very excited for all of you to hear it. And now, The Garden by Emma Törzs, as read by Erika Ensign.
Most mornings, the woman sits in her garden. Most mornings, I sit on my roof. In this way, looking down over the tall stone walls of her courtyard, I can see her gray head bent over her gray hands. She's a wealthy woman. You can tell from her flowers alone. They're so healthy. Their petals lush and soft like the skin of children fed on milk. It's hot and dry in our city, water at a premium, and keeping flowers this alive is expensive. Every night I hear her sprinklers go on, the mechanical shick-shick, shick-shick, as they rotate in their metal cradles. Then the soft patter of droplets on leaves. And at first, the sound snuck into my sleep and gave me nightmares. Too much like rain. But now I find the sprinklers soothing. When the sun comes up, the woman sits under the beating blue of the sky and stares at her plants as they dry in the heat, the wet shine evaporating from the dahlias, the bougainvillea, the coiled ranunculus, and sunset colors of gold and blush. Sometimes a young man comes out and brings her pink iced tea that she never drinks. Even her tea is made of flowers. My room, and the roof it's attached to, belong to a friend, an artist. Her parents have money, and they own this whole building. My friend, Angelica, lets me stay for free, which is the only way I could live in such a nice neighborhood, with its watered flowers and small domesticated dogs and outdoor cafes where you can't just sit down. You have to be led to a seat like on an airplane. I've never been on an airplane, but you pick these things up. Angelica and I are both unmarried, so her parents pay a haughty maid to come cook and clean for us, and to report on whether we sleep alone. This afternoon, we sit in the hot living room, each of us in front of our own oscillating fan, and Angelica paints her nails while I read aloud from a travel magazine. It's telling us the most scenic routes by which to leave the city and drive through the mountains to another city. Angelica has traveled a lot, and I'm jealous. I've never left. Not for lack of desire. The problem is, the city is completely enclosed by 7 intersecting canals. The water is slow moving, but it's moving, running, so I can't. The canals are thousands of years old, a human mystery of labor like the pyramids or the stone faces on Easter Island, though it isn't the how of the canals that occupies historians, but the why. The canals are extremely narrow and have very high, steep stone walls with no dams and no locks. Furthermore, there are no points of boat access, so historians feel certain they were never used for transportation, and there are plenty of easily crossed bridges, so they can't have been built to defend against an external force. They don't funnel water anywhere but into one another, so they weren't used for drainage either, not for irrigation, and the water that fills the canals comes from deep underground and is full of minerals and poisons, not drinkable. However, a few decades ago, engineers figured out a way to clean it up enough to siphon it into our taps, and now all our houses are piped with it. We shower with it, we wash our dishes with it, we flush our toilets with it. We water our gardens with it. For drinking and cooking, it's bottled water, delivered weekly and getting more expensive by the day. Tourists who come to the city always visit the canals, not for the beauty, because they're essentially just deep ditches of dirty water, but for the mystery. That's why our canals are famous. No one knows why they were built. Except me. I know why. If you're not in a hurry, I read to Angelica, there's no better place to stop and stretch your legs than in the parking lot of Scenic Overlook 133. If I got a lovely little motorcycle, would you ride on the back? Angelica asks me. In the open air? We could take a day trip out of the city and see how it goes. I've told her I don't leave the city because I'm claustrophobic and cars, buses, and trains are too small. To maintain this lie, I ride a bicycle or walk everywhere. Angelica's maid standing above us with a tray of sandwiches says, I certainly would never get on the back of a motorcycle. You've only brought one plate, says Angelica. Go get another, please, for my friend. The maid furrows her brow, and I can see her attempting to see me. She often has trouble with this, and Angelica complains all the time about her absent-mindedness, how she forgets to set a place at the table for me or puts all my laundered clothes in Angelica's room. I smile up at her and she squints at me uncertainly. then leaves to fetch a plate. "What do you think?" Angelica says, showing me her fingernails, now a pale lilac. Very lovely. I open my mouth to tell her so, but before I can speak, the citywide water alarm begins to wail. It's a familiar, droning sound, more familiar with every passing day, as we get deeper and deeper into our current drought, and the rain still doesn't come. It's been a little over 3 years now. Angelica moans theatrically along with the alarm, stamping a foot in frustration. "No," she says. "I was going to wash my hair tonight." "You can use my drinking rations if you want," I say. "There should be enough for a rinse." "I couldn't," she says. "Not even I'm that shallow." It's illegal to run water for the 24 hours after a water alarm goes off. If you run water and can't pay the fine, you get carted off to jail. We've watched it happen in the streets several times. People dragged away in handcuffs as their children sob. Not many people come back from jail. Everyone knows this. Angelica's parents would pay the fine for her, but it would make them angry and they'd restrict her allowance, so she wouldn't be able to buy the expensive oil paint she needs for her paintings. The two things Angelica cares most for in this world are her appearance and her art. Maybe to her they're parts of a whole. She makes portraits of people, sometimes friends or lovers, most often strangers she meets on the street and invites to come sit for her. Her work is starting to be collected, meaning wealthy people are buying her paintings and storing them in warehouses, unseen, as a financial asset. Art was how I first met Angelica. She approached me and asked if I'd be willing to sit for a portrait. I said yes out of sheer curiosity. What would she see? What would she paint? Her first attempt was of a young woman, long dark braid, big amber eyes, but she couldn't get the skin color right. Kept mixing in too much yellow and red, so she grew frustrated and started over. Her second attempt was the same young woman, though this time the eyes were full of flames and the long dark braid was on fire, so detailed you could almost smell the acrid sizzle of burning hair. Angelica couldn't put the fire out, so she gessoed over the canvas and tried one more time. Her third and final attempt was a still life of oranges under a blazing sun, and it sold the moment it hit the gallery where she shows her work. By this time, I'd come to like Angela a lot, and I liked her well-appointed apartment, so I didn't leave. The alarm dies down, and Angelica sighs. "I wish they'd warn us a day in advance at least," she says. "They measure the water levels every afternoon, and..." "Yes, I know, but I'd still appreciate some kind of routine. Why don't they just restrict us on the same day every week? That way we could plan." "The city doesn't like it when we plan." Angelica blows on her nails, then offers them to the oscillating fan. That night, as soon as the sun sets, the water alarm goes off again as an evening reminder. Angelica is painting in her studio on the floor below us, and I'm in my bedroom, propped up against a mountain of pillows, reading a novel. As the alarm's wail dies down, I hear another sound, an illegal sound, and I sit up in surprise. Surely I'm mishearing. But no, there it is, unmistakable. Shick, 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 followed by the fat plop of water on green leaves. I leave my book and climb out the window onto the still hot asphalt roof, peering down into the dark garden below. Nighttime has made it a stranger to me. In the dark, it's all moist, shining petals and tangled vines glimmering from inky pools of deep shadow. I lie on my belly, my chin resting on my crossed arms, and listen to the water, waiting. Sure enough, after a quarter of an hour, the telltale yellow headlights of a water enforcement vehicle flash outside our neighbor's house. An orange-uniformed officer gets out, climbs the stone steps, and knocks loud enough that I can hear it over the dogged sound of the illegal sprinkler. Someone inside opens the door, spilling a triangle of light out onto the porch, and I can see the officer talking, gesturing, nodding. A clipboard is passed inside. A moment later, it's returned. The officer reaches out his hand and retracts it, now holding a wad of bills, which he tucks into his breast pocket as the front door closes. He drives away. The house has paid both a fine and a bribe, and the sprinkler keeps going, all through the night. I fall asleep wondering about the price of each water droplet. "She's asking to be arrested," Angelica says a month or so later. The water alarm has been going off with more and more frequency. 3 times already this week, and it's only Thursday. And each night, our neighbor leaves her sprinklers running and the water enforcer comes to collect. Everywhere else, the city is getting drier and drier. Trees along the medians shriveling. Leaves on bushes crisping. Any remaining grass burnt yellow and brown. Our bottled water has been re-rationed according to the lowest limit of medical guidance. Yet the sprinklers keep going. The garden is more beautiful than ever. Skinny neighborhood cats are always crouched in the shade now, thirstily lapping water from the plant's cupped leaves, and it seems as if all the city's birds flock here. I'm woken at dawn by their cries. Maybe she's asking to go bankrupt, I say. She's paying the fines and bribing officials every night. And for what? Flowers? Angelica strikes a pose, head back and hand up like a statue of a dancer. For beauty, she says. We're in the market, where everyone is tutting disconsolately over the empty baskets and shelves, where fruit and vegetables used to sit in plump piles. Now it's all jars of pickles and olives, brined last year before the worst of the drought. There are dried beans, a few sad pods of okra, some herbs. No nuts, no grapes, no rice. The drought has spread beyond the walls of the city and is consuming the surrounding countryside. Actually, says Angelica, dropping her hand, I don't find the garden beautiful anymore. It gets uglier to me by the day. I drop a sprig of rosemary into Angelica's basket. You should see if our neighbor will sit for you. Angelica whirls on me, her eyes animated. Now, that's an idea. We take the long way home, winding down side streets instead of walking the straight shot down a traffic-congested thoroughfare, and we end up on the pedestrian path running parallel to the East Canal. It's a hot day. It's always a hot day. And Angelica hides from the sun beneath a wide-brimmed hat and dark glasses. The few bedraggled people we pass eye her hungrily. From afar, she looks clean and cool, a nearly impossible feat. Close up, though, I can see her flushed cheeks and the rivulets of sweat trickling down her neck. Water her body can't afford to lose. Usually, I don't approach the canals, an instinctive, energetic avoidance like the repulsion of a magnet. Today, though, I find myself drawn to the high stone barrier that separates the walking path from the canal's edge. Angelica trails behind me, and we lean our elbows on the wall, looking down. As soon as my eyes adjust to the darkness of the crevice below, a jolt of shock runs through me. The water is far, far beneath us, farther away than I've ever seen it. It's just a gray-green trickle in a drying bed. Angelica makes a small, frightened sound. No wonder the water alarms keep going off, she says. I've never seen the level so low. I can't even smell it. I sniff. She's right. Normally, it's impossible to avoid the musty, mineral, wet stone scent of the canals. You can smell them from the street. Standing directly above one like this, we should be getting at least a waft of damp. Even the underground springs must be drying up, I say, and my voice is pitched all wrong. I sound exhilarated rather than anxious. I look across to the other side, and it looks just like this side. Same enclosing wall, same signs warning not to lean too far. There are even 2 people almost directly across from Angelica and I, also looking down into the shallow, shallow water and speaking to one another about it worriedly. There are buildings, buses, the same savage blue sky. When these canals were first built, they delineated the civilized city from the surrounding untamed land, and the view from the inside to the outside was as different as dry from wet. Back then, when you looked across the canals from inside the city, you saw mostly green. Dirt roads wound through fields healthy with agriculture and up into the rocky foothills of the small mountains, their slopes bristling with fruit trees and dotted with goats. The sky held clouds, which held water. Meanwhile, inside the canals, it was all stone and mortar, wheels and ladders, humans and their animals. It smelled like baked grains, fried fish, vinegar, bruised fute, human effluvia, flowers. At the time, it seemed loud. Everybody always shouting, ringing bells, swinging hammers, playing music, often poorly, though now I realize that world was quiet in comparison to the constant machine and engine sound of today. Now, in the city of millions, No matter how quiet the night, there is always a car nearby doing something. Driving, honking, alarming, backfiring. Does it sound the same on the other side? Smell the same? Feel the same? I don't want to be here anymore, Angelica says, casting a last anxious glance at the drying canal before pushing herself from the wall. Me neither, I say. The next morning, as always, I go out onto the roof. Below me, the garden is soaked. Blossoms hanging waterlogged and heavy on their delicate stems. Rivulets still streaming down the veins of leaves and dripping onto the dense green grass. Politicians are downplaying the death toll from this drought, but we all know it rises by the day, and the water enforcement officers have become a symbol of the city's collective thirst. Images of their orange shirts adorn protest signs. The very wealthy, including Angelica's parents, have begun making their plans to move from the city and leave thirst to the poor. Ambulances wail day and night, and the desiccated carcasses of birds and squirrels are piling up beneath the dead trees. Meanwhile, down in the neighbor's garden, everything is so wet and shining it is obscene. As I watch, the old woman tilts her gray head back, her eyes closed, and I see that she's smiling. Her nostrils flare in and out like she's smelling all that wet soil. Then, she does something she's never done before. She opens her eyes, turns her head, and looks right up at me, unerring and direct. I start with surprise, but don't lean away. I meet her gaze. I let her look. She raises a hand and curls her fingers in a wave, and tentatively, I do the same. Then she turns away again, back to her garden, and to the young man coming out with her flowery pink tea. There are people in the city who would kill for a sip of that tea, but I know she won't take a single mouthful. I climb back through my window, and for some reason, my heart is beating so fast, I feel almost alive. Some days later, Angelica whirls into the living room, beaming at me. There's not enough water for regular showers anymore, and her hair is perpetually unwashed, tied back in a tight ponytail, her lips chapped. Her parents fired our maid for stealing water rations, despite Angelica's protests, and ever since the maid departed, her clothes have been wrinkled and smell like body. Still, she is beautiful, and I return her smile. Yes? I say. Our neighbor says she'll sit for a portrait, Angelica announces, then raises a finger as I start to clap. On one condition. She says you have to be there as I paint. I go still. She says you don't have to do anything, Angelica continues. You only have to sit while she sits. Why? She didn't say. Angelica gives me a curious look. Why haven't you ever mentioned knowing her? I don't know her. We've never spoken. You'll do it though, won't you? You'll sit with her for me? And so it's arranged. Instead of going to her garden, the following morning our neighbor will come to Angelica's studio, and she and I will sit together as Angelica paints. I can't sleep that night and lie awake listening to her sprinklers siphoning water from the veins of our city. The last time it rained was 3.5 years ago, when I just started living here with Angelica. She was supposed to go to an art opening that evening, not her own, a friend's, but she ended up staying home with me, begging me to let her send for a doctor. I'd been in the kitchen when the rain began to fall, and the pain was so bad I couldn't uncurl from where I dropped, my cheek pressed to the cool tile. No doctor, I made her promise. No doctor, squeezing her hand so tight she gasped. She kept asking me, "What do you need? What can I do?" Nothing. An illness, it comes and goes. No one can do anything. It'll pass. Go to your party. But she wouldn't. She held my hand. She stroked my hair. When the rain let up around dawn and I was released from the agony enough to regain some awareness, I saw that Angelica had put a pillow beneath my head, and she was asleep on the floor next to me. There was a half-drunk glass of water beside her, its rim covered in her red lipstick prints. Water keeps Angelica alive. I toss and turn in my bed, the brass frame creaking. I've had these thoughts before, obviously. I've loved so many people. Yet somehow it feels new every time. This conversation with myself, this theoretical bargaining exercise. A few hours of suffering each week so Angelica could keep living until she dies. It would be a simple choice, wouldn't it? If it were a choice. Which it's not. It will rain, or it won't. The weather has nothing to do with me. Nothing at all. I'm almost certain. I wait in Angelica's studio as she goes to fetch our neighbor at the front door. The studio is on the second floor of the building, a very large, unadorned room with big, high windows to the south and east, and rows of track lights on the ceiling. The wooden floors are mostly covered with paint-splattered drop cloths. Anyone who enters inevitably leaves with paint on the soles of their shoes and tracks oily dots of color through the rest of the apartment and down to the street. But we don't have a maid anymore to run after them scrubbing, so now it's no shoes allowed. Will our neighbor take off her shoes? I doubt it. A canvas sits in the corner, drying, with a man's face on it. A fleshy face, sparse eyebrows, and I recognize him with a jolt. It's the water enforcement officer who comes each night to our neighbor's house to collect the fine and his bribe. In this portrait, he's not in his orange uniform. In fact, he appears to be shirtless, but the background of the portrait is awash in oranges. I suppose he sat in this very chair, vulnerable and unclothed, his throat working as he swallowed nervously beneath Angelica's keen artist's gaze. Probably thirsty, like everyone else, but less thirsty. A creak in the hall outside the door, and suddenly, there she is, our neighbor, closer than I've ever seen her. She's small and stately, sharp-eyed, smiling. Angelica is ushering her in, making introductions, and a moment later, her hand is in mine. It's dry and limp, and her touch sings into me. "A pleasure," says our neighbor. "All mine," I say. And I know. We both know. We've met before, many times, in many different guises, though not for some time. Not for quite some time. Did I suspect it before? I must have, drawn to her as I was on some visceral level. Why else would I have agreed to come and sit for Angelica? Why else would I have stayed here in this building? Why else would I have crawled out onto the roof every day for 3.5 years, watching the neighbor obsessively, even before her garden became the only healthy square of land in the city? She never comes outside when the sprinklers are on, and she never drinks her flowered pink tea. Never once a sip. That alone should have told me. We don't drink. If water is falling, we're in agony. If it's running, we can't cross it. I should have known. I did know. She's sitting next to me now, letting Angelica arrange her just so, gray hands crossed in her lap, posture erect, regal. The room is growing hotter as the sun rises, and Angelica is dewy, her upper lip glistening, the roots of her unwashed hair dampening. The neighbor and I are, as ever, unmoved by the heat. Angelica is chatting, asking sweet, innocuous questions, and the neighbor is answering. She's lived here all her life, for the past 50 years in that very house, yes, with that very garden. Yes, she adores her flowers, yes, but thank you. I do my best, so difficult these days. What a pity, what a shame. But surely it'll rain soon. Surely this is all a lot of agitation for nothing. Yes, I'm very comfortable. I'll tell you when I need a break. Angelica begins painting. The neighbor and I sit in silence, both of us with our eyes on Angelica and every single other sense trained upon each other. Angelica frowns as she mixes her paints, frowns as she puts the first strokes on the canvas, squeezing out dollops of shining red onto her palette, adding yellow, shaking her head as if to clear it, adding more yellow. Her frustration is palpable, as it was when she tried to paint me. Angelica is so talented. She sees so clearly. Like every human being, she was born thirsty. After an hour or so, the neighbor abruptly drops her pose and says, "I could use a break, if you don't mind." "Of course," Angelica says, and puts down her brush and palette knife. "Take all the time you need." "And perhaps another fan? It's getting so hot in here." "Absolutely. We have an extra one upstairs." Angelica glances at me silently asking if I too need a break, and I give her a minute shake of my head, so she stands and says, "Be right back." We wait in tense silence until the door shuts behind her. Then I turn to the neighbor and say, You want to drain the canals. She raises her eyebrows. Don't you? It's ridiculous, I say. One garden isn't going to make the difference. Well, certainly the canals are drying up with or without me. I'm just speeding the process along. I blurt out a very stupid question. I can't help it. But why? She regards me incredulously and speaks slowly. So we can get out. Out. A place I have never been. I was born to the city, and the city built a perfect cage to keep me. A surge of feeling blooms from a hollow place inside my body and courses through me like hunger, if hunger were made of heat. What happens when we're out? The neighbor flashes yellowed teeth at me, a smile. What do you think? Death, destruction, chaos, pleasure, power. Exactly, she nods. Exactly that. But the city is our home, I say. Everyone I've ever loved has lived here. Are you worried about your painter? You can protect her, surely. I think about all the theoretical midnight bargains I've made with myself, thinking what pain I would trade for my loved ones' lives. Hundreds of bargains over the years. Hundreds of people, all of whom died, eventually. She'll die anyway, though, says the neighbor, following my train of thought. They always do, you know that. But what about the people I will love, I wonder? The ones I haven't met yet. What bargain would I make for their future? Angelica comes back in then, toting a metal fan, and there's a flurry as she plugs it in and sets it up in front of the neighbor, who doesn't need it. Angelica needs it more. I know how hot she is, how thirsty, how grimy she feels, and how hard it is for her to keep her spirits up, to keep painting, to keep up her belief or her pretense of belief in art. Angelica isn't a good person or a bad one. She runs on beauty like she runs on water. She's generous when the mood strikes her, but in some ways it's a false generosity, because the wealth belongs to her parents, not to her. And all her life there's never been a threat that the money might stop coming, so it costs her nothing to spend it or share it. She's done some awful things, and some decent, even wonderful things. She's finished many excellent paintings. If she can make it through this drought, she has perhaps 40 years left, 50 at most. A drop, as they say, in the bucket. The neighbor and I are quiet while Angelica paints. It's going poorly. I can tell from her frequent sighs of irritation. She keeps squeezing out too much yellow, too much red. Can't course correct. And after another few hours, she calls it a day. She thanks our neighbor, goes to let her out, comes back to me with her shoulders slumped. Awful, she says, shaking her head. What a waste of paint. What a waste of time. What a waste of a life. I don't know about that, I say. And I really, truly don't. I don't know. I could kill our neighbor, I think. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could. It's one of those pieces of instinctual certainty I get from time to time. Maybe if I killed her, the rain would come? No certainty there. Maybe if the canals dry up and the neighbor and I get out, we can bring rain. The hurricanes, tempests, flash floods, the ground so dry the water just sits on top of it and the whole city drowns. Screams audible only between claps of earth-shaking thunder, lightning pulsing in strobes, frying the electrical circuit, the smell of burning hair and charred flesh. In the fading evening light, I walk back to the East Canal. The other side looks different to me today. The sky seems bigger, and in the distance the dry brown mountains rise and fall like the spine of a sleeping beast, its hide scorched black with evidence of recent wildfires. Whenever the mountains go up in flames, smoke and ash settle down into the valley, onto the city, smothering its noise and silence. I stare down into the depths of the canal, at the puny ooze of slow-moving water keeping me in. The neighbor is right. The canals are drying anyway. There's nothing we can do to stop it. Nothing anyone can do, except conserve water and hope for rain. What's one garden? One life-sucking garden. a garden to end a city. It's dark when I finally walk home. Music and laughter and shouting coming from every street corner, every idled car, every opened window. More and more, people are living their lives after sunset, when the heat lets up. Babies who should be asleep are sitting with their mothers on front steps, determinedly suckling from dry breasts. Teenagers on benches mash their lips together chastely, their tongues too dehydrated for proper kissing. Someone asks me for money. Someone offers me a prayer. Most people don't notice me at all. As I turn onto our street, I see that Angelica's studio windows are all lit up. She's returned to her doomed painting of our neighbor. She's still working, still trying to make it beautiful. A bag of bones and fur, a cat, leaps from the dead branch of a tree onto the stone wall of our neighbor's garden and disappears into the darkness beyond. Dark flowers, dark leaves, dark vines, purple, indigo, black. Brushstrokes of white where light glints off wet. Through the sounds of the city, the cars and the music and the prayers and the chatter, I hear the sprinkler come to life. Shick, 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 shick. Turn by turn, drop by drop, the garden flourishing behind the walls.
Emma Törzs is a writer, teacher, and occasional translator based in Minneapolis. Her debut novel, Ink Blood Sister Scribe, was a Sunday Times bestseller, a Good Morning America book club pick, and a New York Times notable book, and has been translated into over a dozen languages. Her short fiction has been honored with an NEA Fellowship, a World Fantasy Award, and an O. Henry Prize, and has been published in places such as American Short Fiction, Strange Horizons, Lightspeed, and of course, Uncanny. She's an enthusiastic graduate of the Clarion West class of 2017 and teaches currently at Macalester College. And now our poem, Wishbone, by Prosper Ìféányí, as read by Matt Peters.
We made do with what we had on the land that was given to us. The land, gorged with sand and dusty murals. How people lived was quite simple. Holograms sold things at the market. Money was no longer the exchange unit of commodities, as the crude method of trade by barter was refined. In the future, everyone had everything, and one's aggrandizement was fulfilled or marked when he had the means to fulfill the bargain of another through exchange. I know the topography of this land, how arabesque curtains were put aside and replaced by butterfly wings, that when a person walked through this curtain, his body was marked with chalk and colors. When it rained, it didn't rain with fists. The rain treaded softly on our skin. We hardly noticed we were wet. The sun was an open book, and everyone could actually tell what it was thinking. Everyone knew what aspect of nature was hurt because everyone was paying attention. If the wrong flower was pruned down, it was given a proper burial or refined and tacked to a belladonna hat. Instead of individual perfumes, there was a roster for a perfume to be released into the air daily. People had more than they could eat. Bread was made from mushrooms, and when they wanted hot milk, they had dragon milk. Paper cups could hold water, and weeds grew a consciousness not to make a home where they weren't wanted.
Prosper Ìféányí writes from Lagos, Nigeria, a finalist for the 2024 Gold Line Press Poetry Chapbook Contest, and a finalist for the 2024 Grey Grummer Poetry Prize. His works are featured or forthcoming in Transition, Magma Poetry, Black Warrior Review, The Offing, Plume, Obsidian, Rust and Moth, Denver Quarterly, and elsewhere. Thank you for joining us on the Uncanny Magazine podcast. Today I'm joined by Emma Törzs, the author of this month's podcast story, The Garden. Welcome, Emma.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
This is just such a beautiful story filled with all these little intricate details and nice character notes. What was your starting point or the inspiration for this story?
I started this story the way I start and then end up finishing many stories, which is I will write an opening paragraph, like an image will come to me. In this case, the image was sitting on a hot roof, looking down into someone else's garden and watching their flowers bloom. So I wrote this first paragraph years ago. Every so often I would return to it and start poking it. And I knew certain things about the narrator. I knew that who the narrator was something of a mystery, and that I wanted the narrator's identity to sort of unfold as we read the story.
Right.
And that's all that I knew about the story. So I would return, I would try to, I played around with multiple possibilities over the past couple of years. And then I was commissioned for this Uncanny story.
Woo.
And I will say I have been writing novels for the past couple of years. This is the first short story I have finished in like 3 years.
Yay.
So thank you very much. So I was very, very nervous. I was like, oh gosh, I really want to give Michael a really good story. And I feel like it's my like comeback kid moment. And so I was like, okay, I think this story like has something. I think I want to try to work on this story. So I went back to it and was trying to formulate some kind of plot. And because I've been writing novels, I think I was really hooked in the idea of a plot.
Yeah, Uncanny doesn't care about plots.
Yes, and I was trying to
we do
take
people,
myself away from it, but I was like, I don't need a plot in the typical sense. And something that I've noticed about speculative stories, not all of them, but a lot of them have like cleaner resolutions than what you might find in like a capital L literary fiction short story. And I was like, okay, I feel locked down by the idea of like a really clean resolution. And then I read a short story by Cortázar called, I don't remember what it's called, but it's about axolotls. If you just Google axolotl Julio Cortázar, you'll find it. And it's like 2 pages, and it's just about a guy looking at an axolotl, basically. And then, things happen barely. And it's such a good story. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to write like an axolotl story where things just kind of happen and there's no clean ending. And I'm just going to free myself from the tyranny of the plot. And as soon as I decided that, for some reason, I suddenly knew what the story was about and just like click-clacked my way all the way to the end on a wave of excitement.
So it's interesting because I feel that you have these intricate literary stories that we've published before, but I didn't feel like they were like super intricate. Like your World Fantasy winner did not have what I would call like this strong science fiction resolution at the end. I thought it was kind of more literary, open-ended.
I think that for short stories, I tend to lean more open-ended, like, I'm going to leave you with a feeling, man. But not
it's all about the vibes, the kids say.
It's all about the vibes. And I kind of forgot that in my years of writing novels, which I feel like I want my novels to have a really satisfying conclusion.
Right.
And I got really into capital P plot. So I was like plotting everything and like twists and turns and this and that. It's actually really different than writing a short story, which I've always been led more by language than anything else when I'm writing short fiction. And then characterization and plot when I've been writing novels, which is like new to me kind of. I've only published one novel. I've written more than one, but only published one so far, working on another. So that was really interesting, sort of reminding myself like, no, when it comes to short fiction, you just go sentence by sentence, man. Just,
let it all build.
Let it all build. Follow where it leads.
What was the easiest part of writing the story, and what was the most challenging bit?
My secret happy place in writing is descriptions of nature. Every time I get hung up, I like give myself a little treat and will spend a while like describing a tree or a mountain scene, or whatever it is that I'm writing. I just like kind of let myself go into the landscape a little bit. I often have to cut long descriptions of nature. You don't need 2 pages of a pine tree description in most things. I think that there's a time and a place for 2 pages of pine tree, but mostly no. And so this story, because it's about a garden, I felt like I was allowed to kind of return to the garden over and over and give myself those little hits of writerly dopamine. And briefly describe the garden. I mean, in this story too, I cut down a lot of garden. So that was the easiest part for sure. And as for the challenges, as I was just saying, I think the idea of giving up my control on the plot was challenging for me. But as I gave up control, I discovered a lot of things about the story. You will know, if you have read the story, that the main character is like some sort of entity, like magical entity.
Right.
And one of the challenges was I kept trying to figure out what magical entity they were. So I was doing all this research on like obscure magical creatures that would possibly be locked inside a city. Like I had made up that they couldn't cross running water. And I always knew that they couldn't cross running water.
So were they vampires at a point, or?
They were never vampires. I don't know what they were. I really had no idea the whole time, and nothing fit. And I would try to make up a creature that they could be. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to make up all these rules for this magical creature that I've invented. They can't cross running water, and they love it when it's hot, and they shapeshift and this and that. And then I was like, actually, I don't need to decide what they are. That's not the point of the story. The story is not about a magical creature, like at its heart to me. The story is about, like drought and resource depletion and the apocalypse.
all the fun things.
Yeah.
All the good times. That's interesting because not for 1 second did I not, while reading it, did I feel like there wasn't like this intricate story in your head of all of the rules. Like I do
have some.
Like it felt like it was, and that's like I feel like that's when world building is at its best, not when it like, now let's sit here and talk. I am now going to be the character who explains the rules of this universe to this other character who knows. I like it when I can feel though like a consistency in how things are done and just kind of let it envelop me and just kind of pick up the clues.
I'm glad that you said that because I do have my own idea of what this character like can and cannot do and all of the rule-y type stuff. But I left most of it out of the story, hoping that like the pertinent things, which is like can't be rained on, can't cross running water, that's really all you need to know, I think, for the purposes of this story. I hope.
I thought so. So the vividness of the city really resonated with me as someone who's traveled to many cities, and I often get lost in maps and histories of different places. Have your own travels infused elements of the story? And do you have a favorite city?
I, too, love to travel. It's what I spend almost all of my spare money on, and sometimes my non-spare money that I shouldn't be using to travel. And when I wrote this city, I wanted it to feel like a city that could be in many different places. I didn't want it to have any incredibly specific cultural markers. And, I toyed with having it set here and there. And then I was like, no, I want the idea of this like self-contained mythic city that could be in many different places. I was thinking in some ways of Mexico City because of how it's built like on water. And there are like canals. And I was thinking of Venice also with like the canals. And then I was thinking of like really dry Mediterranean cities. I did like brief Google searches, like what grow in dry city?
Go to southern Spain. What is there?
Yeah, exactly. I was actually just in Spain last week in a city I've never been to before for my cousin's wedding.
Ooh.
Pontevedra.
Oh, nice.
It's beautiful. But my favorite city of all time is Minneapolis, Minnesota.
I do love Minneapolis.
I love Minneapolis. I'm like a freak Minneapolis loyalist. I'm not from here originally. I'm from Massachusetts, but I've lived here almost 20 years now.
I could easily live in the Twin Cities, though. I've spent a lot of time there and just absolutely love I think, and this actually gets to your story. Like I feel some of the cities, and right now I'm in Champaign-Urbana, which is kind of a college town 3 hours south of, 2.5 hours, I guess, because traffic. Now we can go faster from Chicago. And it's kind of in the middle between St. Louis, Indianapolis, and Chicago, but it gives it kind of this island feeling where like it is kind of its own, which is to get back to your story, the story. Like, one of the things I love about the Twin Cities is how like it's culturally self-sufficient to some degree.
It really is. It's quite far from any other like major metropolitan area, Chicago being the closest, and it's an 8-hour drive.
Yes.
If the traffic is good. But I love Minneapolis. I think that what makes me like love a city most would be the people in the city, obviously, and I have a great community here. But if I had to live in another North American city, I would live in either Montreal or Mexico City for sure. I love both those cities a lot.
Tell us about something you've read, watched, or consumed lately that you'd love to share with our listeners.
Right now, I'm on this horrible kick that I just don't recommend, and I don't know how it happened, but I'm reading every book ever written by Anne Rule, who is like one of the foremost crime writers in the U.S. She actually died somewhat recently, but I have no interest in true crime or serial killers whatsoever, or at least that's what I thought. I was always like, what is with this true crime shit? Everybody's into it. Why do women like serial killers? None of this makes sense. I feel outside the cultural conversation. And then I read this book by Anne Rule, and she's an amazing writer. And the books, like, she structures them so novelistically, and they're such amazing character studies, not only of these psychopathic murderers, but also the victims. And so character-wise, they're amazing. But as I'm reading them, I'm just like, I am disgusted with myself. I'm also in my house alone, which is rare. My housemate is gone, and so I'm just terrified all night. So I have to stop. So I don't recommend Anne Rule, but also I think she's an amazing writer. But that's a cheat because it is a secret recommendation. But my actual recommendation is when I write, I always listen to an album like completely on repeat, and I just repeat it until I just can't take it anymore. And right now I'm very into Sun Signature with Elizabeth Fraser. It's a shorter album. There's like 6 songs and then a remix of those 6 songs.
Interesting.
Elizabeth Fraser was in the Cocteau Twins.
Ah, yeah.
And she has this unbelievable ethereal voice, and she recorded this album when she was like 60. She's 60 now, so in her late 50s or early 60s. And that makes me so happy as somebody who is now not a young person anymore, creeping towards being middle-aged and then old, hopefully, if all goes well for me.
I know that feeling.
It's just so nice to listen to music made by a grown-up. And it's so stunning, and her voice is just, I mean, I can't imagine that it has ever been better. So that's my recommendation, is Elizabeth Fraser, Sun Signature.
That is a good one. I will have to check that out. Thank you so much for joining us on the Uncanny podcast. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you once again for listening to the Uncanny Magazine podcast. As always, we couldn't do it without all of your support, Space Unicorns. Whether you're patrons on Patreon, backers of a Kickstarter, which is going on right now, subscribers via waitlist books, or whether you just run around and spread the good word to everybody. Thank you so much. We couldn't do it without all of your support, and I especially couldn't do it without the greatest staff in the universe. And that includes managing editor Monty Lin, poetry editor Betsy Aoki, podcast producers Erika Ensign and Stephen Shapansky, podcast readers Erika Ensign and Matt Peters, interviewer Carolyn M. Yoakum, and assistant editor Tanya Chen, along with all of our submissions editors, the absolute best staff there could be. So thank you. Hopefully you will come back next month where there will be more uncanny shenanigans. Thank you so much, and shine on, Space Unicorns. Nay!
The Uncanny Magazine podcast theme is courtesy Null Device. Want to join the Space Unicorn Ranger Corps? You can find poetry, stories, and nonfiction every month in Uncanny Magazine. Go to uncannymagazine.com or subscribe to the ebook version at waitlistbooks.com. Uncanny Magazine podcast, copyright Uncanny Magazine.